hoping we win the game tomorrow.
Hope we get a hot wife.
That's so realistic, you don't even know. So for these things, what is keeping that hope alive in you all? What's making you all want to continue and hope for this?
Drove a Lamborghini on my birthday last year. That keeps me hoping.
Okay. What about someone else?
We're getting better with our practice.
There's hope in the practice.
Yeah.
That actually brought up a point that I'm going to talk about. So ultimately, we hope for what we want in the future. We hope for the possibility of what's going to happen. And with hope becomes an expectancy. So that hope turns into God, that we're expecting a result from him, an answer. It may not always be the answer that we want, but there's hope in that he will respond to us, and that hopefully it'll be what we want. You just talked about sports. In sports, we prepare, we practice, and we go through the motions. And sometimes, I played softball. Softball is very repetitive. Literally, you do drills every single day, the same exact drills, and it gets really boring. And you don't get to inter squad a lot like basketball or soccer, things like that, because the game changes so much that you can't just play against each other and it works. So we put hope in the fact that we prepare a specific way and that we'll perform a specific way. And our hope is that when we perform, that's going to be enough to get us to our goal of the championship. Men's basketball, literally every single day, they have practice every day, but literally majority of the team is in there on their own time shooting free throws every single day for hours by themselves, just shooting free throws, free throws. They have one of the highest shooting percentages of free throws in the conference. Now their hope is that they spend hours in the gym shooting free throws, so that way in the game they perform. Now their hard work is showing up, but their hope is not in, I'm just going to show up and hopefully it's good. No, their hope is in the work that they've done. That's the same thing, kind of equivalent to the same thing of us in our relationship with Christ. Christ already done the work. He already put in that work. So our hope is in him, and because he already put in that work, he is going to show up. We have hope in that he's going to perform for us. When we get to verse 4, it talks about inheritance. And let me find verse 4. It says, "And into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you." So unlike worldly things such as sports, like we've been talking about, where there's not a guarantee that what we're hoping for will come to pass, with Christ, as Christians, our inheritance is a guarantee. Christ has guaranteed that of us. So this inheritance can't go bad. It can't, again, like we talked about sports, we talked about all these different things, like a field. We hope that on game day, it's going to be sunny. It's never sunny on game day. It can be sunny every other day of the year when you have to practice and do conditioning, but it is not typically sunny on game day. But the field's not going to go bad or the field may go bad, but our inheritance in Christ, what we've been working for, that's always going to be good. And it's kept in heaven and guarded by God until Jesus returns, by God's power. I find that extremely encouraging, that what we're working for, our inheritance, that God's power that's secure in him. There's nothing to worry about. Our hope is even higher, because it's him himself who is securing it for us. So has anyone in here ever received an inheritance? All right, so why'd you receive it? Well, obviously, someone passed away. But I mean, in the sense of, what about you? Why was it you who received it? Either of you can answer.
Have a relationship.
Family? Okay. What about you guys? Just family? And just because of the fact you're family, or is it because you meant something to them? That you're of importance?
Both.
Both. So, as a child of God, we're born and adopted into his family. So, as a part of his family, we're put into his will. Not that God's going to die, obviously he's not going to die. But we get to receive his inheritance because we're his. And we get it just for that fact, because we're his. We don't have to do anything because he already did it. Jesus already did it for us. I think that's kind of huge to really just think about and to embrace that fact that we've been given an inheritance because we're his son or daughter. We're the son or daughter of a king. We're royalty. At conference, I thought it was great. Side note, I believe at this point, I've heard so many of them, but Carl Lentz had said You know, as a daughter of the king, you should not be dating a peasant. And we should, sometimes we live that way. Like, we're not going to obtain an inheritance, but we are the sons and daughters of the king, and we need to keep that mindset. In verse 6, it talks about great rejoicing in trials and different things that we go through. And the experience of new birth and anticipation of an inheritance enables Christians to greatly rejoice in the hope of what's to come, despite the trials and hardships they face. So for you guys, how would you encourage someone who's going through trials and tribulations in life, or going through some pretty tough things? What would you do for them or say to them?
Be there for them.
So how would you be there for them?
Hang out with them. Play ball with them.
Okay.
Just tell them that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and there's hope.
Okay. How have you all found joy in tough situations? I feel like it's sometimes really easy to tell somebody that, but very different when you live it out. Very different when you're going through something pretty tough and everyone's like, just be happy, you have Jesus. And you're like, oh yeah, thanks. But, so is there anybody in here that can give a story and testimony to that? Just hoping.
Lord.
You have a story?
Yeah, but when I have issues, like I've had a lot of things happen in my family. Like my uncle and cousin died like within a month of each other. And for me, it was just spending time in God's presence and worship, and that's where I found my joy.
Yeah, that's good. That's definitely relatable. Everybody has family issues. For myself personally, again, I've been through a lot of family issues, and I quickly figured out that at my lowest of lows, things such as softball would typically have been what I would have put in place. It would have made me feel good. I would have gone and hit for hours just to feel better, or this or that. But when I recommitted my life to Christ, I figured out that God was the only thing that brought the joy. And I went from trying to just fill anything in my heart with where that void was, to the only time I felt joy was when I was in the presence of God, when I was thinking about God, when I was around other people in my community that had a heart for Christ. And I didn't desire those things anymore, and that brought the joy in that situation. So even though I went from being right here and going through all the same things and it didn't feel anything, I was in that same place, but now I had Christ, and all of a sudden there was a joy and there was a happiness, because it was about Him at that point and not about the situation. My hope became in Him and not about the situation anymore that I was going through. In verse 7, it talks about proven genuine faith. So in y'all's life, what is the most valuable possession you have and why? Or just what's valuable to you?
My education.
Okay. What's some other things?
Children.
Winning. I'm an athlete.
Sorry.
That's right.
No, that's
My trophies.
My muscles.
What about some other people? That's this side of the room. One person from this side.
My car.
The car? Okay. So, in the first century, the most valuable and precious piece of metal is gold. And the writer here, he uses the illustration of comparing our faith and compared to gold, in that where our faith is more important than gold. Now, think about in the first century, these people are probably like, what? Like, no shot. Like, that's like, I mean, even to some people here, like, money is very important, or winning is very important, or you said like trophies or whatever it would be. But to think about like, my faith is more precious than that. And those things perish away, but my faith has to continue to endure. So, what do you think the author is trying to, never mind, I just told you that answer. So we'll go on to the next one. So, the author, he's painting a picture of how valuable one faith is. So even something such as gold, which is put through the fire to become pure and will perish, but one's faith won't. So I think just that's a really important illustration to think about, of something that really can go through the fire, that our faith is more important to that. It's important to note that the text does not say that that the times of fire creates one's faith. No, it's saying that the fire reveals a faith that's already there. So what's inside of us, it's already there. Just sometimes we need to go through certain things and endure those things in order for us to see what's really inside of us. Let's see if I can, I'm terrible at drawing, but hopefully you guys like this. So, who here has seen Titanic? Right? So Titanic, you got the water, you got the iceberg. That's supposed to be an iceberg. Think more like that. But so like we only see this part of stuff. This is eye level. This is all we see. But really, we have all this under it. Now it's the same thing within ourselves. Now we go through trials and things like that we may be only seeing this part. But once the trials, we get done with them and we go through them and think about our entire lifetime, then we're starting to understand that we have all this faith under here that we didn't know actually existed. That we didn't know was inside of us, right? So, so I just want to, I hope it's like a good visual to understand that, you know, what you have inside of you is way more than you're actually letting on, that you even acknowledge. This doesn't only apply to faith. This reminds me of a story of, there's a sick man that he kept praying and praying and asking God that he wanted to get stronger. And God, make me stronger, make me stronger. So God told him, I'm going to put a boulder outside, this ginormous boulder, like size, like bigger than a car. And he told him, when you can push the boulder, then you'll be strong. So, I mean, the man's like literally like about to die. And he's like, seriously, God, like how am I supposed to push this boulder? Like I can't even get out of bed. God told him, just do it. So he went out and day after day after day, he pushed it and the boulder didn't move. And he'd come back in like, God, like, what the heck? You told me to push this boulder. How am I supposed to get stronger? And God would tell him, just go out there and push the boulder. Just push and push and push. So day after day after day, and finally months went by and he couldn't push the boulder out of the way. So he got mad and said, God, like this isn't working. And God told him to go look in the mirror again. So he went and looked in the mirror and he was strong from pushing this boulder day after day. He was livelier. He had color back in his face. He didn't look as sick. And God told him, you know, it wasn't about you needing to move the boulder. It was about you working to move the boulder. It was working through that. His faith was in only being able to move the boulder, but it wasn't in the process of what was going on. And that, you know, that process made him strong and made him who he is, so that he was strong afterwards. So often we don't know what's in us until we're pushed to the limit of finding out. And that is also with our faith. And lastly, again, talking about faith, blind faith in verse 8. Has anyone here ever struggled with not being able to see Jesus? Is something? Like sometimes you're just like, bro, I just really want to see you. Like, you know, you're like struggling or something, be like, this would be a lot easier if we could have this conversation with you sitting next to me. Or, you know, if we could just have like a phone call, like a 5-minute phone call to heaven, like I'll be totally good. Like, don't worry about it. You know? But, you know, these people that 1 Peter is writing to, they're in the same boat as us. They didn't see Jesus. They heard about him, but they didn't actually see him. So it's the same thing that we live through, but they had blind faith. They believed in him even though they had never seen him. It's important to note that just because there's not a visible relationship doesn't mean that there's not a real relationship present. That, you know, it's just like the wind. We can't see the wind, but we know it's real. We can feel it. We can feel our relationship with Christ. We can feel an encounter with God. We can feel when these things are happening. So I just want to encourage you all to stand strong in your relationship, in those trials, in those tribulations, to find your hope not in yourself, not in the situation, not in the circumstance that is happening at that moment, but know what that inheritance that you're living for, that hope of what you're going through is going to kind of come to pass when Jesus comes back. So I want to leave you with some words of encouragement, some that I hope will cause you to continue to find hope in the Lord and remind you to smile in the face of adversity. It says, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs, and the square holes, the one who sees things differently. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only things you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward, and while some may see them as crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. It's from Apple. And I feel like that's the same thing as us in our Christian walks. We're not meant to fit in. We're meant to be rebels and misfits and be round pegs in a square world. And some people are gonna rise up and not want to go against, or to go against what we believe or go against what we say, but it's those who believe and have hope that they can change the world who are going to change the world. So, does anybody have any prayer requests or thoughts? Well, first, anybody have any thoughts or questions that they would like to ask, or anybody that struggles with these things that would just want to ask a question of how to deal with it? Nope. All right. Anybody have any prayer requests? All right. Well, we're going to close out in prayer. Father, I thank you for the hope that is in you alone. I thank you that we have a continuous living hope, God, that is just in you and that we can do all things through you, God. Your word is very clear, God, that you bring hope when we're in trials and tribulation, and that we can rejoice in you because we know that through you there's just goodness and joy, Father. I pray, God, for blessings over every single person in this room. I pray for their families, God. I pray that chains would be broken in every family that's represented and people will draw near to you, Lord. I pray that your light will shine in our lives and that we'll reflect you in everything that we do. I pray these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you, Melissa. Oh, kind of did not work. Okay.
I wasn't